Ngozi Fulani, the charity boss who was asked where she was really from persistently by the Queen's former lady-in-waiting, has described the incident as abuse. Now, we've been talking about her endlessly. People have been speculating about her, commenting about her all day, but I'm delighted to say that Ngozi herself joins me on the programme now. Hello there. Thank you so much for making time for us. I can't tell you how pleased I am to talk to you today because I feel as if you're being talked about and I'd much rather talk to you than about you. So thank you very much indeed for joining me. Let me first ask how you're feeling now.
I'm feeling fine. Thank you for inviting me. I'm just watching this unfold and yeah, I'm good. I'm great.
You're feeling good. Well, I'm glad that you're feeling good because I felt that your description of how you felt at Buckingham Palace after Lady Susan Hussey had asked you all those incredibly persistent questions and seemed not to believe a word that you said in response. And when you talked about standing on the outskirts of the room and talked about somehow kind of just about engaging in light conversation, but being in such a daze of shock. I thought that was one of the most kind of powerfully evoked descriptions of being a victim of racism when you're absolutely not expecting it that I've ever heard. So can you tell me those moments when you were standing on the outskirts of this reception, how you were feeling then as you were trying to kind of understand what had just been done?
So nobody wants to experience that kind of racism. You first of all have to identify, you're there asking yourself, is this really happening? Have I not answered this woman I don't know how many times? For her to say to me that she can see it's going to be a challenge for me to answer a question that I've already answered, that kind of showed me that, okay, there's much more to this. Previously, she had taken my hair, moved it out of the way so she could see my name badge. Now, you don't, as far as I'm aware, you don't just put your hand in someone's hair. You don't know them. It's not acceptable behavior. So I kind of had a warning that something wasn't quite right, but she's an elder. And where we come from in my culture, my community, we respect our elders. So I thought perhaps I've answered her several times. Maybe she doesn't hear me. Maybe because of someone's age, you have to wonder if there are other elements at play. So I wanted to believe that this is just a question of her not understanding what I'm saying. But then when you say, I can see I'm going to have a challenge, I just knew what it was and it didn't feel right. And what do you do in that circumstance? What do you do in that situation? If we're there for 16 days of activism, I keep coming back to that. This is the time we're supposed to be supporting those who are affected by domestic abuse. All of us in that room had a common aim, and that was to highlight this. So why am I being questioned so ferociously? Why don't you ask me about domestic abuse or our organisation, or ask me, if you will, where I come from, and then when I answer you, just accept that and move on. It was a lot to process.
An awful lot. Yeah, I can tell. I can tell you're still processing it because you're going through it and through it and through it, trying to kind of make sense of something that doesn't make any sense, really, does it?
Right. Making sense of nonsense. That, and also, what's really amazing, and I'm kind of familiar with this. I've seen how other women of color and other women have been treated when they speak out against racism or abuse or whatever. Oh, we have, I've got so much support and I thank everyone who supported. But you're always going to get those individuals who appear to have nothing to do but justify bad behavior. And I don't spend too much time on them, but I just know that, wow, we have some work to do, really.
All right, let's talk about that. So we know what was said and we know that you stood there, you wanted to leave, but you felt you couldn't. You were thinking, is there anyone I can complain to? But obviously it wasn't that kind of event. You couldn't sort of go to the kind of, complaints officer and make a complaint. We know that there are other women who heard very clearly everything that was said. We had Madhu on the show yesterday talking about it, confirming that everything you said was true and confirming her own amazement, indignation, hurt, all those different feelings, shock, I think, among them. And then we know that you went home eventually.
I did, yeah.
What was going through your mind 2 nights ago when you're finally back home and you're thinking, hang on, what just happened to me at Buckingham Palace and what do I do about it? Do I make it public? Do I keep it quiet? What shall I do? Tell me what you were thinking at that point, Ngozi.
First of all, I'm standing at the periphery of the room. There are other people approaching me talking about Sistah Space work. There are people there that I really admire their work, but I've disengaged now. I'm trying to find a place for myself. I don't know if I should just go, but I'm there representing Sistah Space, and there are service users in the room, and there are, this is about the 16 days of activism, so I really should stay. But that feeling of displacement, I cannot even begin to express, because I'm very proud of my African and Caribbean heritage, very, very proud, and I wear it proudly, but I'm a British national, yes? And that somebody who say they represent the royal family, say that they are a woman of class, if you will, because there's nothing classy about that behavior. If you invite someone, and the invitation didn't come from her, it came from Buckingham Palace, therefore, really, why should I leave? I have every right to be there.
Sure.
But it was uncomfortable, and I called my children, my adult children, and I called my colleagues, and I needed to find a place for it. And I was processing it. And then, I can't go to the host because she's the host. I can't go to anybody else. Why should I ruin their evening? So I'm just holding this thing. But also, I didn't know who this person was, and I did not want to expose her, because I do not see the point in someone who's an elder being kind of dragged out like that. But as I understand it, she's acknowledged her behavior. So it's not just me saying it. She's acknowledged
she
it.
definitely hasn't denied it, and she resigned very, very speedily. So I don't think there's any doubt at all that she said exactly what you said that she said. I don't think she's not questioning it. The royal family are not questioning it. Nobody's questioning that.
And I'm simply saying it's not okay. It's not okay. Yeah.
No, it's not okay.
Whether it's Buckingham Palace, as I said, it's Crystal Palace.
Yeah.
It could be Alexander Palace. Doesn't matter where you are. You have to treat people with respect, regardless of your personal views. You keep them to yourself, or don't represent the royal family.
I completely and utterly agree with you. But what I was wanting to ask you about, Ngozi, was the bit where you've gone home, you're trying to make sense of it. As you say, you spoke to your colleagues at Sistah Space. I'm going to talk to you about Sistah Space in a minute. Of course I am. I'm going to make space for Sistah Space on this programme, so we know the reason that you were invited there and what you've represented and worked for all your life. Don't worry, we're going to get to that bit. But I just want you to talk me through the bit where you've spoken to your children, you've spoken to your colleagues, you're trying to think about what to do, and you eventually make the decision that what you're going to do is you're going to tweet about this. And now, tell me what when you did it, what you were hoping to achieve, what you were thinking was going to happen next.
Now, I think people need to understand my relationship with Twitter. Yes?
Yes.
I've been relationship with Twitter for years, and there is about, I don't know, between 10 and 20 people that whenever we put something out, they engage. And it's almost like you don't know them in person, but they follow you and they support you. So you get feedback.
Right.
And that's like, this happened to me. It's heavy. I don't want to hold it. I gave it, to the Twitter family who, there are some academics, there are some service users, there are just the community, everybody's there.
Yeah.
And they can give you a different perspective, because you need to question yourself. What did this happen? And really, what do I do with this? So, of course, the first few minutes, my Twitter family responded. And then there was an avalanche. And the vast majority of people are understanding. and very kind and outraged as well,
Yeah. So Ngozi, since that moment, and it was only yesterday morning, it feels about 100 years ago, doesn't it?
Yeah, gosh, it does.
It's been huge, absolutely cataclysmic. Since that moment that you released on Twitter what had been said to you only the night before, it feels as if all sorts of incredible things have happened. I mean, there's been this immediate apology from Buckingham Palace. There's been the resignation of Lady Susan Hussey. There's been you talking about it. There have been people talking about you. There's been the suggestion that it's overshadowed the Prince and Princesses of Wales's tour to America. There's been so much said and so much done since that moment. How much of it is, do you think, constructive and worthwhile and what you kind of might have hoped would happen? And how much of it do you think is just noise and reaction that will lead to nothing much at all?
I can see noise, I'm always going to speak my truth. I advocate for anyone who's going through anything to be able to say so without terrible repercussion. Now, as I said, I've seen what happens. There are a few prominent Black women who have voiced things over the years, and the response has been disgusting and outrageous. Those people should feel so ashamed of themselves. But I will also say that I took pains not to reveal this person because that was not the intention. I put the initials up thinking there's 300 people there. They're not going to know who it is because I did not know her relevance. I've never heard of this person, to be honest. I just went somewhere. This happened. Let me bring it to my Twitter family.
Can I ask you something, Ngozi? You said you didn't want her to be fired, you didn't want her to be exposed, you didn't want her to have to resign, you didn't want any of that. But what you would like, I think you said, maybe by this time you're being paraphrased by everybody, but you said something about what you would have liked would have been some kind of education of the establishment, some kind of change, some kind of, explanation about why this is wrong and painful, racist, hurtful, rude, inappropriate, all those awful things.
First of all, I would have liked it not to have happened.
Of course.
Of course. Right?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, this person is an elder, right? And as I said, in our community, we respect our elders. I wouldn't want any individual. I've seen what's happened to other women who have spoken out against things. And I've seen how people can be very nasty and disrespectful and foolish. Yeah. I wouldn't want this to happen to that person, no, regardless to what they did. I think that you're a coward if you attack a woman based on something that she has said, whether you believe it, whether you think it was justified or whatever. That's her experience and her story to tell. If you can attack someone, threaten them or whatever because of that, then you are a weak coward and I don't have time for you. So I wouldn't want anything to happen to that woman, which is why I didn't want her exposed. I had to process what I needed to feel before I even thought about what should happen to her. Look, she works for Buckingham Palace. They dealt with it. It's not mine to deal with. It's for them, yeah?
Absolutely. Have they contacted you now? The palace keeps saying they've contacted you, have they?
I think they've made an attempt to, but via somebody else. And I do believe that they will contact me. And I do believe that they are trying to do the right thing. And I understand the difficulty. And I'm thinking we can still work this out. There can still be a positive outcome. We can do away with the hate. This is the 16 days of activism against violence to women and girls.
Yeah.
We can still make that the focus, and we can still have that discussion about racism and making sure this doesn't happen again.
I'm going to talk to you about Sistah Space, but I need to ask you two questions first. The first one is that there are lines being drawn between what you went through at Buckingham Palace and the way you described it and the feeling that it evoked in you, which is, hideous, really. And the things that Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex, has said and that might be coming out in the documentary that's going to be released next week. Now, we know the things that she said because most of us watched the Oprah interview. We've got some good ideas about what she was implying was going on at Buckingham Palace. Do you think that your experience gives any kind of credence or credibility to what she said?
What I'm very careful to do I represent Sistah Space. I and also as someone who's an advocate for those who have gone through abuse, I wouldn't dare try to tell someone else's story. I listen and I empathize, and I think that any establishment that's accused of racism should take it very serious. I am not happy about how she was treated. As I said earlier, I think anyone who kind of goes after an individual like that needs to reflect on themselves.
Okay.
But I don't know Meghan's story. It's hers to tell. My experience was what it was, and that's what I need to deal with first.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely, of course. Let me ask you one more thing. I mean, one of the things being said, and actually it's not just being said, we can all see it happening, is that the Prince and Princess of Wales's tour to America, where they're in Boston and there's the Earthshot Prize, and it's a very important tour for them, is being vastly overshadowed by what happened to you at Buckingham Palace, despite the best efforts of the palace to act really quickly and, distance themselves from Lady Susan Hussey. She resigned. What they would like to do is move on swiftly. And of course they can't, because what you've said is so horrifying, so dramatic, so traumatic, that it's had the most enormous impact. Everybody's talking about it. Everyone's talking about what you went through and not talking about that tour. It's overshadowing it. Do you have any thoughts about that at all, or do you just feel that none of this is of your making anyway?
Well, none of this is of my making. It's an unfortunate situation. I don't follow the royal family, so I didn't know where they'd gone or why they'd gone or even what happened. And it's something, again, I have to reflect on. Sistah Space is about peace.
Right, now tell me about Sistah Space, because that's one of the main reasons I would like to talk to you.
We are about peace, and they're a young couple to me. And I just hope that we need to have a conversation about racism, and we need to do it in an orderly fashion, and there needs to be a positive result. It doesn't need to be what it appears to be. We can bring it back. Yeah.
Yes. And for those people who have heard now the words Sistah Space hundreds of times today in every news outlet, every newspaper, they've heard it from me at least 5 times. We keep on saying it. Just very briefly explain what you've been doing, what your life's work is, so we understand why you were invited to Buckingham Palace in the first place, Ngozi.
So ironically, the reason that we got the invitation is because of the work we do around domestic abuse and racism and misogyny. That's why we received the invitation, so that we should go there and be treated like that, or I should, was a thing. But you have organizations that cater for people with disabilities. You have Muslim sisters, Jewish sisters. You have organizations, LGBT plus communities, who have specialist refuges because it needs a certain understanding. So when it comes to Black women also needing that, what's the big deal? I don't understand it. We are doing work that makes those affected by domestic and sexual abuse be able to report to mainstream organizations and get an equal, adequate response. So we've rolled out Valerie's training. Valerie Ford and her baby daughter were murdered, and that was the birth of Sistah Space. We're trying to make sure that everybody has an equal access to support when facing domestic abuse. We're bringing it back. The focus: women should not be affected by gender-based violence.
And Ngozi, I can't thank you enough for coming on the programme. It must be the most tumultuous time for you, just to try to kind of comprehend the sheer magnitude of A, what you've been through, but B, the extraordinary reaction to it all over the world.